Ever feel that, like that tightness in your chest when you're facing a deadline?
Yeah.
Or maybe your mind starts racing with what ifs before a big event.
Oh, yeah.
We're diving into the world of anxiety today.
Yeah. It's a good one.
But not with like generic advice or anything. We're going deep.
Mhm.
This deep dive is all about you
Yeah.
and how you experience anxiety.
Yeah.
We're using insights from this book,
Oh, yeah.
Unwinding Anxiety by Judson Brewer.
Yeah, Judson Brewer's great. He gets it.
Have you read it?
I have. I've read it. It's really good. He's a great storyteller, too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to try to unravel those feelings
Yeah,
and hopefully make them a little bit more manageable.
for sure. Because knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to anxiety, the more we understand, the less we have to fear it.
Definitely. And the cool thing about Brewer is he doesn't just talk the talk.
I know. He's been there.
He's been there.
Yeah.
And there's a great anecdote in the book where even as a doctor, he thought that his anxiety, which was manifesting physically, was actually something else completely.
Wow. What did you think it was?
Giardiasis.
Giardiasis. You're kidding. That's wild.
Can you believe that?
No.
Yeah.
It just goes to show, right? How sneaky anxiety can be. We try to rationalize it away. We blame it on something else entirely. It's like our brains are trying to protect us from the scariest thought of all, that maybe, just maybe, our own minds are working against us.
Yeah, and it also highlights how we misinterpret the signals.
Absolutely. We ignore them, we downplay them, we try to power through, like you were saying, and it can really backfire.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I like this analogy that Brewer uses. He talks about anxiety like a violin string.
Okay.
That's just a little bit out of tune.
Right.
And instead of, just taking a second to adjust it.
You just want to chuck the whole violin out the window.
Exactly. We're ready to trash the whole instrument.
I love that. It's so true. We catastrophize.
Yeah.
We go from 0 to 60 in like 2 seconds flat.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you don't need a new violin.
Right.
You just need to make a small adjustment. And I think that's a really empowering message.
Yeah. And what I really liked about Brewer's approach is that he doesn't advocate for eliminating anxiety
Right.
altogether.
Yeah.
It's more about changing our relationship with it.
Yes. It's about understanding it. It's not this enemy to be vanquished.
Exactly. And he talks about this information gap theory, which I found really interesting. Have you heard of this?
Yes. I love this concept. Tell us more about it.
Okay, so basically our brains, they crave information to help predict the future.
Of course, because that makes us feel safe.
Yes.
Right.
But when that information is missing, cue the anxiety.
Exactly. Our brains go into overdrive trying to fill in the blanks, and sometimes they don't exactly paint a pretty picture.
Exactly. Especially in our world of 2047 news and social media.
Oh, don't even get me started. It's like we're bombarded with negativity 24/7.
Right. It's like we're wired to be on high alert all the time.
We are, in a way. Our brains haven't quite caught up to the digital age yet. We're still wired for survival, for scanning, for threats. And unfortunately, the constant barrage of information, especially the negative stuff, it keeps our ancient threat detection systems on high alert, even when there's no real danger present.
It makes you wonder, is it really us? Or is it like this environment that we're in?
It's a bit of both, isn't it? Like nature and nurture. We come pre-programmed with this ancient wiring, but our environment can definitely amplify or dampen those signals. And let's be honest, our current environment, it's like anxiety central. But there's good news.
Oh, there is. Tell us.
We don't have to be victims of our own biology or our news feeds for that matter.
Yeah.
We can learn to manage this. We can retrain our brains to be less reactive, to find that sweet spot between vigilance and peace. And that's what we're going to unpack today.
So our brains are wired to kind of anticipate threats,
Yeah.
even when they're not really there.
Right.
But then on top of that, he talks about how this ties into our habits.
Yes.
And he uses this analogy of a slot machine,
Oh, I love that analogy.
which I thought was so good.
Yeah.
So how does that work? How is anxiety like a slot machine?
Well, he talks about how those same reward pathways that are usually associated with, like food
Right.
or connection
Yeah.
can actually be hijacked by anxiety.
Really?
Yes.
I never thought of it that way.
It's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't usually think of anxiety as rewarding, but
Right.
in a way, it can be.
How so?
Well, it all comes down to this really basic cycle. The trigger, the behavior, and the reward.
Okay.
So let's say your trigger is you have a deadline at work. Okay. You feel that anxiety start to build, right?
Yeah.
And now you could choose a behavior like breaking down the task into smaller steps.
Right.
Or you could choose avoidance.
Oh, yeah. That sounds more like it.
Right. And often that avoidance, it provides like a temporary reward,
Yeah.
a reduction in that anxiety.
Procrastination station.
Exactly. So you're checking social media instead of tackling the task.
Right.
You get that temporary relief, but
then it backfires.
it backfires
Right.
later on.
Yeah.
Because now you have even more anxiety.
Right, because the deadline is even closer.
Exactly.
And you're even more behind.
Exactly. And so it becomes this vicious cycle.
It's like you're hitting the spin button.
Yes.
On the slot machine.
Again and again.
Again and again. Even though it's not really...
It's not good for you in the long run.
It's not in my favor.
Yeah.
But you get that rush.
That anticipation.
Yeah.
Even if it ultimately leads to more anxiety.
Right.
And here's the thing. Even the act of worrying itself can become the addictive behavior.
Really? So just the worry.
The worrying. Because it gives us this false sense of control.
Interesting. So you're saying by worrying, we're actually feeding the anxiety.
Yes. Because we feel like we're at least doing something about the problem, even if that something isn't actually helpful.
Right. So the takeaway here is that your anxiety, it's not a personality flaw.
No.
It's a habit loop.
It's a habit. And like any habit, it can be changed.
Okay. So before we jump into like how to fix it.
Yes. You're right to pause there.
He has a whole process, right?
He does. And it's important not to skip ahead.
Okay.
He says, before we can even think about rewiring those loops, we need to map them.
Okay.
He even provides this really helpful mind mapping exercise in the book to help you identify those triggers, the behaviors, and the rewards that are keeping those cycles spinning.
So it's like we're trying to navigate a maze.
Yes.
In the dark.
In the dark. We need to turn on the lights.
Yes.
Figure out where we are.
We need a map.
Exactly. And then we can figure out where we want to go.
So we've mapped out our anxiety habit loops.
Yeah.
Which feels like a huge step, honestly.
It is.
But now what? How do we actually start to rewire those patterns?
Right. Because we've had them for so long. They feel very ingrained.
Yes.
But they're not.
Okay, cool.
We can change them. And you mentioned earlier Brewer's gears for change.
Yeah, the gears. Tell me more about those.
Okay. So he calls them gears because they kind of build on each other.
Right.
And they move us towards this kind of lasting change.
Right.
The first gear, mapping the loops, which we've already talked about.
We've done that. Check.
Done. Second gear is where it gets juicy.
Okay.
This is where we update the reward value of our anxious behaviors.
Update the reward value. That sounds very technical.
It does, doesn't it? Like we're like reprogramming a computer or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's really not that complicated.
Okay. So how would we actually do that? Update the reward value.
So it's about getting curious and paying really close attention to how those behaviors, those anxiety-driven behaviors, how do they actually make you feel?
Okay.
Not just like that initial, oh, I feel a little bit better, but the whole picture.
Okay.
So give me an example. Let's say your habit is stress eating.
Oh, yeah, I know that one.
Right. So instead of just mindlessly downing a bag of chips, what if you really tuned into that entire experience?
Okay, so like really savor every salty, crunchy bite.
Yes. But then also notice what happens afterward.
Okay, so you're satisfied for a minute, but then you just feel kind of gross.
Right.
And bloated.
And maybe even a little guilty.
Yeah, a little bit.
Right. So by bringing mindful awareness to the whole experience, both the alluring and the not so much, you start to see that the reward wasn't as amazing as your brain had hyped it up to be.
Yeah, it's like tricking us.
It is. Our brains are constantly telling us these stories.
Yeah.
Oh, this will make you feel better. And then we buy into it.
Right. We fall for it every time.
Hook, line, and sinker. But when we start to pay attention, that's when we can start to make different choices.
And Brewer calls this disenchantment.
Disenchantment. Yeah.
So it's not about deprivation.
Yeah.
It's just about seeing those things more clearly.
Exactly. It's like taking off the rose-colored glasses.
Okay. Yeah.
And once you're less enchanted by that old habit,
right,
then you're ready for third gear.
Okay. What's third gear?
Finding a bigger, better offer.
A bigger, better offer. What does that even mean?
Yeah,
what could be better than those like quick hits of relief, whether it's the sugar or the procrastination?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And it's different for everyone. But Brewer's big argument is that mindfulness itself can actually be a bigger, better offer.
Really? How so?
So he talks about how for some people, even just taking a few moments to focus on their breath, to really notice the sensations of breathing, can be more rewarding on a deeper level than giving in to that old habit.
Okay, so I get how mapping the loops helps us understand the habits and how updating the reward value helps us see them more clearly.
Right.
But how does mindfulness actually become more rewarding?
Yeah, that's the thing, right?
It seemed almost counterintuitive.
It does, because we're so used to looking for that quick fix,
Right.
the immediate gratification. But mindfulness is more about playing the long game.
Okay.
It's about cultivating a different kind of reward.
And what kind of reward is that?
It's about finding peace and contentment in the present moment rather than chasing after some fleeting sense of satisfaction.
So it's not about making the anxiety disappear, but it's changing how we relate to it.
Exactly. It's about making friends with our anxiety, not trying to fight it.
Befriending our anxiety. I like that. It takes the pressure off.
It does, and Brewer gives us this great acronym
Oh, yeah.
to help us do just that.
Okay, what is it?
RAIN.
RAIN.
Okay.
Recognize, allow, investigate, note.
Okay. Break that down for me.
Okay, so when you feel that anxiety bubbling up,
Yeah.
first you just recognize it
Okay.
without judgment. Just, oh, hello, anxiety, I see you there. Okay.
Then you allow it to be there.
Don't try to fight it.
Don't fight it. Just let it be.
Okay.
And then you investigate. You get curious. What does this feel like in my body?
Okay.
What are the sensations? What are the thoughts?
Right.
And then finally, you just note them
Note them.
without getting swept away.
Okay.
So it's not about analyzing your anxiety or trying to figure it out. It's just about noticing it.
Wow, that's so simple, but it seems really powerful.
It is powerful
Yeah.
because it allows us to create some distance
Okay.
between us and those overwhelming feelings.
I love that. RAIN. That's a tool that we can all use
It is anytime, anywhere.
right now.
Exactly. It's always available to us.
That's awesome. Well, this has been incredible.
It has.
Thank you so much for breaking all of this down for us. Of course. Thank you for having me. This is always such an important conversation.
It is. It's so important. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is just that we're not alone in this.
We are not alone.
Anxiety is a human experience.
Absolutely.
And there are tools to help us manage it.
There are. And the more we talk about it, the less power it has over us.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. From Judson Brewer's book, he asks, if anxiety is your brain's way of trying to keep you safe, what if you thanked it for its efforts and explored other ways to find peace? So just let that sit with you for a little bit. And in the meantime, keep exploring those tools, keep practicing RAIN, and stay tuned for more deep dives into the fascinating world of the brain and how to unwind those anxious habits.